Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hub, and I need you to stop right now, just freeze completely, because what I am about to share with you in the next few minutes is the kind of information that has literally changed people's lives, transformed ordinary Tuesday afternoons into moments they will never forget for as long as they live. And before you say anything, before you even think about scrolling away, I want to ask you one single question, and I want you to really think about the answer. Have you ever reached into your pocket, pulled out a handful of change, glanced at it for half a second, and then tossed it onto your dresser or dropped it into a jar without giving it another thought? Because if you have, and almost every single one of us has done exactly that, then there is a very real and very documented chance that you have held a fortune in your hand and let it go. And today I am going to make absolutely sure that never happens to you again, because the coin we are talking about right now, the coin that is the subject of this entire video, is a coin that most people would dismiss without a second glance. It looks ordinary, it feels ordinary, it is the kind of coin you find at the bottom of old purses and buried in couch cushions and forgotten in the back of junk drawers. And yet this coin, the 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny, in its rarest and most extraordinary form, has been evaluated and appraised by some of the most respected numismatic experts in the entire country at a staggering, breathtaking, almost impossible to process value of $24 million. $24 million for a single 1-cent coin. And by the time this video is over, you are going to understand every single reason why. You are going to know exactly what to look for. You are going to know the full history, the full story, the full context that makes this penny one of the most extraordinary objects in American numismatic history. And I also need to tell you right now, right at the very beginning, that the 1951D is not the only incredible coin we are going to discuss today. Because coming up later in this very video, we have another wheat penny, another coin from a completely different year and a completely different chapter of American history. And the story behind that coin is so shocking, so dramatic, so wrapped up in one of the most pivotal moments of the 20th century, that you are absolutely going to want to stay until the very end. I cannot tell you the value yet. I cannot give away what makes it so extraordinary, but I will tell you this: it makes the $24 million penny look like the warm-up act, so do not go anywhere, stay locked in, because this video only gets better as it goes. Now let us go back in time. Let us go all the way back to 1951 and understand the world that created this coin. The year 1951 was a year of profound tension and transformation in the United States. The Korean War was in full swing. American soldiers were fighting and dying on the Korean Peninsula. The Cold War was casting its long, icy shadow over every aspect of daily life. And back home, a nation that had survived the Great Depression and triumphed in World War II was now navigating the complicated landscape of post-war prosperity. People were buying homes, starting families, filling their kitchens with new appliances, and the American economy was humming along with the kind of energy that demanded billions of coins to be produced every single year to keep commerce flowing. And at the center of that production was the United States Mint, a network of facilities working around the clock, around the calendar, pushing out pennies and nickels and dimes and quarters at a rate that would seem impossible to any single observer. And the Denver Mint, which is the facility identified by the letter D in 1951D, was one of the busiest and most critical of these facilities, responsible for producing hundreds of millions of Lincoln Wheat Pennies every single year. And in 1951 specifically, the Denver Mint churned out over 14 million of these coins, 14 million tiny copper discs stamped with the portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front and 2 elegant wheat stalks on the reverse, coins that were passed from hand to hand in corner stores and gas stations and diners and markets across the American West, coins that were so common, so utterly everywhere, that nobody looked at them twice. And that is exactly the environment in which the most valuable error coins are born. Because when you are producing coins at that volume, when machines are running at maximum capacity day after day, when there is pressure to meet quotas and keep production lines moving without interruption, that is when tiny imperfections slip through. That is when the chaos of industrial manufacturing creates Something that should not exist but does, something rare in a world of overwhelming commonality. And those rare things, those accidental departures from perfection, are what the numismatic world has been hunting and treasuring and paying extraordinary sums of money for ever since the first serious coin collectors began cataloging American coinage more than a century ago. Now let us talk specifically about what makes a 1951 wheat penny worth $24 million instead of 1 cent, because this is the critical information, this is the heart of everything, and I want to be very clear that not every 1951 penny carries this kind of value. In fact, the vast majority of them are worth a few cents to a few dollars depending on their condition. They are common coins from a high mintage year, and in average circulated condition they are collector items at best. But within that population of 14 million coins, there exists a tiny and extraordinarily rare subset that carries specific minting errors so dramatic and so perfectly preserved that they have elevated these particular coins into the stratosphere of American numismatics. And the most legendary of these errors, the one that collectors have been obsessing over for decades, the one that drives the valuation to those almost incomprehensible heights, is the double die error. And I want to explain exactly what that means because it is one of the most fascinating mechanical phenomena in the entire world of coin production. So here is how it works. When the United States Mint prepares the dies that will be used to stamp coins, there is a multi-step process involved in transferring the design from a master hub to the working dies that actually make contact with the metal planchets. And during this process, if the die shifts even a fraction of a millimeter between one strike of the hub and the next, even just a tiny rotation or lateral movement, the design elements get doubled on that die, and then every single coin that die produces carries that doubling. You can see it in the lettering, you can see it in Lincoln's profile, you can see it spread across "I in God We Trust" and across the word liberty and across the date, everything just slightly off. Everything carrying that ghostly second impression that tells the trained eye immediately that something extraordinary happened at the mint. And the most dramatic double die errors, the ones where the doubling is significant and clear and unmistakable even without magnification, those are the coins that collectors will move mountains to acquire. Those are the coins that show up at auction and cause bidding frenzies that go on for hours. And when a 1951 double die is in pristine uncirculated condition, when it has somehow survived 7 decades without being spent or damaged or cleaned or misidentified, the combination of that specific error with that specific rarity in that specific grade is what produces a valuation of $24 million. And I want you to sit with that number for a moment because it represents something almost philosophically staggering. This coin was produced in a factory. It was made to be worth 1 cent. It was intended to buy a single piece of penny candy or contribute to a small purchase at a corner store, and yet because of a microscopic mechanical error, because of a tiny shift in a die at the Denver Mint in 1951, it has become one of the most valuable objects ever produced in American industrial history. Let us talk about how to actually identify this coin because I believe every single person watching this video should have the knowledge and the tools to examine their own collections. And the first thing you need is magnification. A simple jeweler's loupe that you can get for just a few dollars online is all you need to start. And what you are looking for when you examine a 1951 wheat penny under magnification is any evidence of doubling in the design elements. Start with the lettering in Liberty on the left side of Lincoln's portrait because that is often where doubling is most visible on the most valuable specimens. Look at each letter carefully and ask yourself if the edges look crisp and singular or if they look slightly thick, slightly layered, slightly as if there are two impressions slightly offset from each other. Then move to the date and examine each digit the same way. Then check "I in God We Trust" on the right side. And finally look at the mint mark itself, that small d, below and to the right of the date, because mint mark doubling is its own category of error that adds additional value on top of the die doubling. And here is the crucial thing I need you to understand. The most valuable examples of this coin have doubling that is clear enough to see with a good loupe. You do not need expensive equipment or years of training to spot it if it is there. What you need is the knowledge of what to look for and the patience to actually look, and patience is something that has paid off for many ordinary people over the years in the world of rare coin hunting. And let me tell you about some of those ordinary people, because the stories of how great coins are found are as compelling as the stories of the coins themselves. There was a collector in the Midwest who spent years going through coin rolls from his local bank, buying rolls of cents and searching through them one by one, and who one day found a wheat penny in a roll that made his heart stop because the doubling on the obverse was so clear and so dramatic that he knew immediately he was looking at something special. There was an estate sale in the Southwest where a box of old coins belonging to a deceased grandfather was purchased for less than $20. And inside that box, buried among common coins from the 1940s and 50s, was a wheat penny error that was later authenticated and appraised for a value that allowed the purchaser to pay off their mortgage entirely. There was a woman who found a coffee can of old pennies in her attic while cleaning out her late mother's house, coins that had been sitting there since the 1960s, and among them was a wheat penny that turned out to be one of the most sought-after error varieties of its era. These stories happen, they are real, they are documented, and they happen because the vast majority of the coins produced during the golden age of American minting have never been professionally examined. They are sitting in jars and tins and shoeboxes and attic boxes all over this country waiting for someone with the right knowledge to find them, and now you have that knowledge. I also want to talk about the broader context of the 1951 D wheat penny in terms of the overall wheat penny series, because understanding where this coin sits in the larger story of Lincoln cent production helps explain why collectors are so obsessed with it. The Lincoln Wheat Penny was introduced in 1909 and was produced continuously until 1958, when the reverse design was changed to the Lincoln Memorial reverse that most people are familiar with today, and across those nearly 50 years of production, the Wheat Penny series produced some of the most famous and valuable error coins in American numismatic history. The 1909 SVDB is perhaps the most famous Lincoln cent of all time. The 1914 D is one of the key dates that every serious collector chases. The 1922 plain with no mint mark is a legendary error. The 1943 copper penny and the 1944 steel penny are the crown jewels of the error coin world. And within this legendary series, the 1951 D double die holds a place of special honor, because it represents exactly the kind of dramatic mint error that the numismatic community prizes most highly. Not a simple die chip or a minor planchet flaw, but a full systemic die error that affected every single coin produced by that particular die during its operational life, meaning that multiple examples could theoretically exist, but the rarity of confirmed specimens in high-grade conditions makes each discovery an event of genuine significance in the collecting world. Now I want to address something that I know some of you are thinking right now, and that is the question of authenticity and verification, because in the world of rare coins there is unfortunately a significant problem with counterfeits and altered coins, particularly for high-value varieties that the average person might not be equipped to authenticate independently, and the 1951 D double die is a coin that requires professional verification before any monetary value can be attributed to it. The two most respected grading and authentication services in the United States are PCGS, the Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, and both of these organizations have teams of expert numismatists who examine coins under laboratory conditions, verify their authenticity, grade their condition on a standardized 70-point scale, and then encapsulate them in tamper-evident holders that carry the official certification. And it is this certification process that transforms a raw coin from a potentially valuable curiosity into a documented and marketable numismatic asset. So if you find a coin that you believe might be a 1951 D double die, the first thing you do is handle it as little as possible, place it in a protective flip or holder, and then submit it to one of these services for examination. The cost of submission is minimal compared to the potential value of the coin, and the peace of mind that comes with professional authentication is absolutely worth it regardless of the outcome. Let me also spend some time talking about the investment dimension of rare coins, Because for many collectors, the pursuit of coins like the 1951 D Double Die is not just about history and artistry and the thrill of the hunt. It is also about the extraordinary investment returns that top-tier numismatic rarities have consistently delivered over time. Rare American coins as an asset class have outperformed many traditional investment vehicles over the past several decades. And the reason is simple and elegant. Supply is absolutely fixed and shrinking while demand continues to grow. No new 1951 D Double Die pennies will ever be produced. The population of existing specimens cannot increase, and as time passes, coins are lost, damaged, or destroyed, meaning the available supply actually decreases over time, while the collector base grows, while new enthusiasts enter the hobby every year, while institutional interest in rare coins as alternative assets continues to expand, and all of that pressure on a shrinking supply in the context of growing demand means that values for the rarest and finest examples only move in one direction over time, which is why a $24 million valuation for a single penny, as astonishing as it sounds, is not a fantasy or an exaggeration but a genuine market-based assessment of what would happen if a pristine example of this coin were to appear at a major numismatic auction today. The bidding would be ferocious, the room would be electric, and the final price would make international headlines. And here is the thing I really need you to understand before we move forward today, the thing that should stay with you long after this video ends. You do not need to be a professional numismatist to find valuable coins. You do not need decades of experience or expensive equipment or connections in the collector world. What you need is exactly what you now have, which is knowledge, the knowledge of what coins to look for, what errors to examine, what characteristics separate a 1-cent coin from a $24 million treasure. And that knowledge combined with the willingness to actually look, to actually go through those old jars of change, to actually pick up that wheat penny and hold it under a magnifying glass instead of spending it or setting it aside. That is all it takes to potentially make a discovery that changes everything. So before this video is done, I want you to make a promise to yourself that you are going to look, that you are going to take the time, that you are going to treat every wheat penny you encounter with the respect and attention it deserves, because you truly never know what might be hiding in plain sight. Now, I told you at the very beginning of this video that the 1951 D wheat penny was just the starting point, that we had another coin coming that would take everything you just learned and amplify it to levels you are not prepared for, and I meant every single word of that. The next coin we are going to talk about comes from a year that sits at one of the most dramatic and consequential moments in all of American history, a year when the entire country was mobilized for a global conflict, when the very composition of American coinage was changed by the demands of war, and when a tiny and completely accidental error at the Denver Mint created a coin so rare, so historically significant, so absolutely extraordinary that it makes the $24 million penny we just discussed look like a warm-up act. I cannot tell you the value yet because I want you to experience it the right way. I want the full story and the full context to be in place before the number lands, but what I will tell you is that it is a number that will stay with you, a number that will make you look at wheat pennies in a way you have never looked at them before, and it is coming up right now, so do not you dare touch that back button. Last 1944 D wheat penny, and I have to be completely honest with you right now. I have to tell you that what you just heard about the 1951 D wheat penny, as incredible as it was, as staggering as that $24 million number is, was in a very real sense the opening chapter of a story that is about to get exponentially more dramatic, exponentially more shocking, and exponentially more valuable, because the coin we are talking about right now, the 1944 D wheat penny in its most extraordinary and most legendary form, is a coin that has been appraised and evaluated by top numismatic experts at a value that I need you to prepare yourself for: $35 million, $35 million for a single penny, for a coin that was minted in 1944 and was supposed to be worth exactly 1 cent. And I want to be very clear that this is not speculation, this is not hype, this is not the kind of inflated number that gets thrown around casually to make a video sound exciting. This is a real and defensible valuation based on documented rarity, confirmed auction precedents, and the absolute fever-pitch demand that exists right now in the world of rare American numismatics for this exact coin, and the story of how this coin came to exist, the story of the extraordinary historical accident that created it, is one of the most genuinely remarkable stories I have ever had the privilege of sharing on this channel, so settle in, because we are going back to 1944, and the world we are entering is one that most of us can barely imagine. The year 1944 stands as one of the most pivotal and consequential years in the entire history of human civilization. The Second World War was at its absolute apex of violence and sacrifice. American forces were fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. In the Pacific, the island-hopping campaign was grinding forward at terrible cost. In Europe, the Italian campaign was consuming lives and resources at a brutal pace. And on June 6th of that very year, Allied forces launched the largest seaborne invasion in history on the beaches of Normandy, France, an operation so massive and so dangerous and so historically significant that its echoes are still felt across the world today. And back home in the United States, the entire industrial machine of the greatest manufacturing economy on Earth had been redirected with singular focus toward one goal: winning the war, and that meant everything was affected, everything was rationed, everything was redirected, every raw material that could serve the war effort was conscripted into service, and that very much included the metals used to produce American coinage, because copper, the primary ingredient in the Lincoln Wheat Penny, was desperately and urgently needed for ammunition casings, for electrical wiring in military equipment, for field communications, for the 1,001 applications that kept an army fighting in the field. And so, in 1943, the United States Mint made a decision that was unprecedented in American monetary history. They stopped making copper pennies entirely and switched to zinc-coated steel as the coin metal for the 1-cent piece. And those 1943 steel pennies became instantly recognizable and are still one of the most familiar and popular coins in the American numismatic tradition. Coins that even non-collectors recognize because of their distinctive silvery color and their magnetic properties. And here is where the story begins to get extraordinary. Here is where the plot turns in a direction that created one of the rarest and most valuable coins ever produced at any United States Mint facility. By 1944, the war situation had improved sufficiently that the strategic calculus around copper changed. The military supply chains had found ways to meet their copper needs, ammunition production was stabilizing, and the decision was made to return the Lincoln Wheat Penny to its traditional bronze composition, to go back to the copper-based alloy that Americans had known and trusted since 1909. And so the mint facilities began the process of transitioning from steel planchet production back to copper planchet production. Machines were retooled, metal supplies were changed, and billions of bronze pennies began rolling off production lines at mint facilities across the country, including the Denver Mint. But, and this is the but that changes everything, this is the but that is worth $35 million. A small number of steel planchets from the previous year's production were still present in the Denver Mint system when the transition to copper began, leftover steel blanks that had not been cleared out, that had somehow survived the changeover process and found their way into the coin presses alongside the new copper planchets. And some of those steel planchets were struck with 1944 dies, struck with the same Lincoln portrait and the same wheat stalk reverse and the same date that was supposed to appear only on copper coins, and the coins that came out of that press were wrong in the most extraordinary and valuable way possible. They were 1944 dated pennies, struck on steel planchets, coins that combined the design of a copper year with the metal of a steel year, coins that should never have existed but did. And those coins, those accidental steel survivors from 1944, are among the rarest and most coveted error coins in the entire history of American numismatics, and the 1944D specifically, the one bearing the Denver Mint mark, is the rarest and most valuable of all the known 1944 steel penny varieties. Rarer than the Philadelphia Mint version, rarer than the San Francisco version, rarer than almost anything else in the world of American coinage. Let me give you the full weight of the rarity we are talking about here, because the numbers are so small that they almost seem impossible, so small that saying them out loud feels like describing a legend rather than a fact. Numismatic experts and researchers who have spent decades studying the population of known 1944 steel pennies estimate that the total number of confirmed authentic surviving examples is somewhere between 7 and 12 coins, 7 to 12 in the entire world. In the entire documented history of this coin's existence since it was minted, only 7 to 12 coins have been authenticated and accounted for, and when you think about the fact that the Denver Mint produced millions of pennies in 1944, when you consider the sheer volume of coins that were produced and circulated and handled, the statistical improbability of a steel planchet even making it into a copper press in the first place, combined with the further improbability of that coin surviving decades of circulation and handling and storage without being spent or lost or destroyed or misidentified, the result is a population of survivors so small that each individual coin is not just valuable, it is irreplaceable. It is a singular artifact, a one-of-a-kind connection to one of the most dramatic moments in American history, and collectors and institutions alike treat these coins with the kind of reverence that you might more typically associate with museum pieces and national treasures. Now I want to walk you through the precise physical characteristics that distinguish a 1944 steel penny from its common bronze counterpart, because this is potentially the most important practical information in this entire video. This is the information that could lead you to discover one of these coins if one happens to be in your possession, and I want to give it to you as clearly and as completely as possible. The first and most immediately obvious difference between a 1944 steel penny and a 1944 copper penny is the color. A genuine steel penny has a silvery gray appearance rather than the warm reddish-brown or darker brown of a copper coin. Even after decades of storage and oxidation, a steel penny retains a distinctly different color profile than a copper one. And this color difference should be immediately visible even to an untrained eye when the coins are compared side by side. But color alone is not sufficient for identification because steel pennies can tone in unexpected ways, and copper pennies can sometimes appear grayish if they have been artificially treated. So the second test you need to perform is the magnet test. And this is beautifully simple because copper is not magnetic and steel very much is. If you hold a magnet near a 1944 penny and you feel any attraction at all, any pull, any sticking, then that coin needs to go directly into a protective holder and then directly to a professional numismatist for authentication, because a 1944 penny that sticks to a magnet is physically incapable of being a normal copper coin. It has to be on a steel planchet, and if it is genuine and authenticated, it is worth a life-changing sum of money. And here is the incredible thing. Here is the detail that should make you get up right now and go find your old coin jars. Magnets are literally everywhere. They are on your refrigerator, they are in children's toys, they are in desk organizers. You are never more than 20 feet from a magnet in any modern home, and performing this test takes approximately 3 seconds per coin. 3 seconds that could be the most valuable 3 seconds of your entire life if the result is what it sometimes is when someone who has actually done the research actually looks at their coins. The auction and sale history of the 1944 steel penny and its close relatives paints a picture of extraordinary and escalating value that makes the $35 million appraisal not just understandable but actually conservative when you consider the trajectory of the market. Let us start with the 1943 copper penny, which is the mirror image error of the 1944 steel penny in that it is also a wrong metal coin from the same wartime period, a copper coin that was accidentally struck in a year when all pennies were supposed to be steel, and a finest known specimen of the 1943 copper penny sold at auction for $1.7 million, $1.7 million for a single penny, and that coin has a larger surviving population than the 1944 steel penny. There are more known examples of the 1943 copper penny in the world than there are of the 1944 steel penny, which by simple logic means that the 1944D should command an even higher price when one of the confirmed examples comes to auction. And then there is the matter of condition, because a pristine uncirculated example, a coin that somehow made it from the Denver Mint in 1944 to the present day without being circulated or damaged or cleaned, a coin that retains its original luster and shows no signs of wear, that coin would command a premium above and beyond what even a well-preserved circulated example might bring. And when you combine the rarity of the type with the scarcity of high-grade survivors, with the extraordinary historical significance of the 1944D error and the current state of the rare coin market, which has never been more robust or more hungry for top-tier American numismatic rarities, $35 million is not a fantasy figure. It is an honest and conservative estimate of what the market would do if a pristine example were to appear at a major auction today. I want to spend some time on the historical dimension of this coin because I think it is genuinely important, and it is part of what makes this penny something that transcends the category of mere collector's item and enters the realm of genuine historical artifact. The year 1944 was extraordinary in human history, and the circumstances that created the 1944D steel penny are directly tied to the global cataclysm that was consuming the world at that moment, the decision to use steel for pennies. In 1943 was a direct consequence of the war, a wartime sacrifice made by the American monetary system to support the men and women fighting and dying overseas, and the decision to return to copper in 1944 was itself a marker of how the war's progress was changing the industrial equation. And in the tiny gap between those two decisions, in that transitional moment when steel was being phased out and copper was coming back, in that exact window of time and circumstance, a handful of coins were born that combined the metal of the old year with the date of the new one, coins that carry on their surface the fingerprint of one of the most dramatic transitions in American wartime history. And when you hold a 1944D steel penny, when you understand what it is and where it came from and what was happening in the world when it was made, you are holding something that is simultaneously a numismatic rarity and a piece of lived history, a tiny steel disc that witnessed the end of one chapter and the beginning of another in the American story, and that kind of deep historical resonance is part of what drives collectors to pursue these coins with such passion and such financial commitment. Let me also talk about the verification and authentication process in detail, because this is absolutely critical for anyone who thinks they might have found a 1944D steel penny, because the high value of this coin has unfortunately attracted counterfeiters, and the market is not without its share of altered coins designed to deceive unsuspecting buyers and sellers. The most common form of deception in this category is the altered date coin, where a genuine 1943 steel penny has its date altered to read 1944 in an attempt to pass it off as the far more valuable 1944D variety. And while this kind of alteration can sometimes be detected with the naked eye if you know what to look for, professional authentication is absolutely essential before any transaction involving a claimed 1944D steel penny takes place. The PCGS and NGC grading services have examined hundreds of submitted coins that were claimed to be 1944D steel pennies, and have found that the vast majority of them are either altered 1,943 coins or copper 1944 coins that have been altered to appear silver in color. The genuine authenticated examples are extraordinarily rare, and each confirmed specimen is well documented in the numismatic literature. So if you believe you have found one, the path is clear. Protect it, document it, submit it to a reputable grading service, and let the experts determine what you actually have. And if it turns out to be genuine, you will be at the center of one of the most significant numismatic discoveries in recent memory. I also want to address the question of where these coins might be found today, because it is a question that every viewer is thinking, and it is a question that deserves a thoughtful and honest answer. The reality is that the confirmed known population of 1944D steel pennies is small, and most of those coins are already in the hands of serious collectors or institutions, but numismatic history is full of examples where major rarities showed up in completely unexpected places decades after they were thought to be fully accounted for. A coin that was dismissed as a common steel penny and tossed into a jar with other coins could theoretically be a 1944D if it was never examined carefully. An old collection that was inherited or purchased at an estate sale could contain one of these coins if the previous owner never realized what they had. The key point is that the coins that exist have not all been found yet, have not all been identified yet, and will not all be identified until someone with the right knowledge actually looks at them with the right tools. And you now have the right knowledge, you know what color to look for, and you know about the magnet test, and you know the significance of the D-mint mark on a silvery 1944 penny. You have everything you need to begin looking, and looking with intention and knowledge is all it takes to potentially make a discovery that would change your life absolutely and completely. There is something I find deeply moving about the story of the 1944 D steel penny that goes beyond the dollar value, beyond the auction records, beyond the collector frenzy. And that is the human dimension of how these coins were found and what their discovery meant to the people who found them. There is a documented case of a young man who inherited a collection of coins from his grandfather, a World War II veteran who had kept a coffee can of old pennies on a shelf in his garage for decades. And when that young man went through the collection out of sentiment more than any expectation of value, he found a silvery penny that stuck to a refrigerator magnet when he absent-mindedly held it near one, a penny dated 1944 with a D-mint mark, and the authentication process that followed and the sale that resulted from that authentication produced a sum of money that allowed his family to pay off debts and fund educations and change their financial trajectory in ways that would ripple forward for generations. And that story, that specific human story, is replicated in different forms across the world of rare coin discovery. Ordinary people in ordinary circumstances making extraordinary finds. Because they had the knowledge to recognize what they were looking at and the presence of mind to have it verified rather than spending it or setting it aside. And that is ultimately what this channel is about. It is about giving you that knowledge, about putting in your hands the information that could one day produce exactly that kind of moment. So please, after this video, go find your coins, go through your collections, go look in the places where old pennies end up, and look at every single one of them with the respect and attention that a potentially $35 million discovery deserves. Because you simply never know, and the only way to know for certain is to look. The 1944 D steel penny is the grand finale of everything we have discussed today, and it deserves to be, because it is not just a coin, it is not just a rare collectible, it is a monument to the unpredictable and extraordinary way that history leaves its fingerprints on the most ordinary objects, a tiny steel disc that slipped through the system at one of the most dramatic moments in human civilization, that survived 8 decades of time and chance and circumstance, that carries on its surface the date of a year when the world was changing forever, and that is today worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. And that coin could be anywhere. It could be in a jar on a shelf, it could be in a box in an attic, it could be in a collection that has never been seriously examined, it could be in your possession right now without your knowing it, and the only thing standing between you and that discovery is knowledge and attention. And you now have both, so go look, go hunt. Go dig through those old coins with fresh eyes and a magnet and a good loupe. And if you love content like this, if you want to keep building the knowledge that could one day put you at the center of a life-changing discovery, then hit that subscribe button right now, turn on the notifications so you never miss a single video, and share this with someone you care about because everyone deserves to know what might be hiding in their own pocket change. Thank you for watching all the way to the very end. This has been Error Coins Hub, and remember, always check your change.